I'm Joan McGregor. I'm director of the Lincoln Center and Lincoln Center of Applied Ethics and also a professor of philosophy. I wanted to tell you a little bit about the Lincoln Center, and then we were going to tell you a little bit about Chautauqua Institute. Institution, excuse me. And so, but let me tell you a little bit about the Lincoln Center. If you don't know about the Lincoln Center, the Lincoln Center was endowed by Joan and David Lincoln that thought it was important to spread ethics across the whole curriculum, across the university. And so the center has been in existence now for over 25 years. And so we're really grateful to the Lincoln family. They also were very interested in, so please come to our other events. We have affiliates across the university from every field doing ethics in about every field imaginable. So if you're not an affiliate, let us know what you're doing, and we'd love to get you on our mailing list and invite you to our talks. And we do kind of regular lunch and learn where we get just people kind of brainstorming about the work they're doing and sharing ideas and building community. But the Lincoln family also was very interested in the Chautauqua Institution, and so you're going to hear in a minute from Jordan Steves, who is the kind of education programmer there. So I'm going to turn this over to him, and then I'll introduce our speaker for today. So thank you.
Thank you, Joan. As Joan said, my name is Jordan Steves. I serve Chautauqua Institution as Emily and Richard Smucker Chair for Education. Yes, it is those Smuckers of the jams and jellies and peanut butters, who are also very big supporters of Chautauqua, just like the Lincolns. So I'm here to offer you greetings from Chautauqua, Chautauqua Institution, Chautauqua, New York. How many have ever heard of Chautauqua or Chautauqua Institution? Okay, that's good. All right. And Mark's a ringer over here. He's my colleague, director of our climate change initiative, and would love for those of you who have interest in that area to engage him in conversation. So Chautauqua is a cultural and education center in Western New York. We are south of Buffalo. We are about as far west in New York State as you can get and still be in New York State. We are nowhere near New York City. But we do invite you to our grounds, which you can see on these slides here. You're seeing our center square, which is called Bester Plaza, where families are gathered for a 4th of July celebration with our community band. And then to the right is our main stage amphitheater, and you're seeing a really well-attended lecture, which is what I'm responsible for. And this will be what you experience this summer when you are here, when you come to Chautauqua. We have a 220-acre campus in Western New York, and we program 9 weeks every summer is our primary business on the pillars of arts, education, religion, and recreation, exploring the best in human values and providing experience that enrich our attendees' lives. We are going to be in session this summer from June 21st through August 24th on 9 different themes for our lecture platform, and Amin will be joining us in the very first week, and we're excited that some students and members of the Lincoln Center faculty and staff will be joining us as well. I'm responsible at Chautauqua for our education programs, which include the lectures, our literary arts program, our history and archives, and our library. And I'm also responsible for stewarding some institutional partnerships, including this one with the Lincoln Center for Applied Ethics, which has been a long-time partnership with many different iterations. And we're grateful to the folks here, to the Lincoln family, to Joan and Erica and Liz and Sarah Florini, who's not here with us, for this wonderful invitation. And we hope to see you all. We hope to see them at Chautauqua at some point. I hope you check us out. I'm supposed to advance the slide so you can see our mission and vision statement. I'll let you read. But thank you so much for having us, and enjoy, Amin.
Okay. Great. Well, let me introduce our speaker today. It's Dr. Ra Mashariki. The title of his talk is Modern AI Accelerating Impact for Climate and Nature. Dr. Mashariki is the Director of AI and Digital Strategies at the Bezos Earth Fund, where he leads a portfolio of grants and investments to drive innovation in AI and environmental initiatives with tangible on-the-ground impact in climate and nature. Previously, he was senior principal scientist at NVIDIA, where he developed forward-thinking AI strategies and technology roadmap for nations worldwide. He also led urban analytics at ESRI, got a lot of, served as adjunct faculty at NYU's Center for Urban Sciences and Progress, and he was a fellow at Harvard's Kennedy School of Ash Center for Democracy and Governance and Innovation. Dr. Mashariki holds a doctorate in engineering from Morgan State University, a master's of science in computer science from Howard University, and a bachelor of science in computer science from Lincoln University. So please join me in welcoming Aman Mashariki.
Thank you. Hello, can you guys hear me? Thank you for that, Joan, I appreciate it. Thank you for having me. So we'll just jump right in. The talk is titled Modern AI Accelerating Impact for Climate and Nature. So for the talk, what I'm gonna do is really sort of walk you through a couple of things. One is I'm gonna give you a behind the scenes look at how essentially you become a part of a startup philanthropy and how you grow and actually in a world in which we started in 2020, for the large majority of the population of the world, AI was non-existent until 2022, and then everything went crazy from that point on. And so I'm gonna try to give you a behind the scenes look at how you take a startup philanthropy, and I was hired in, my doctorate was actually my dissertation was on artificial intelligence at the time. It's called Autonomous Agents in surgical simulation. I did in partnership with Johns Hopkins University. And so I was brought in to think about AI, but we didn't know AI was gonna turn into this thing. And so I'm gonna try to give you a sort of a behind the scenes look at how the Earth Fund as a philanthropy thought about itself, but then also engaged the wider community while moving quickly to make impact, right? And that's the way, you know, I don't know if anyone here has anyone here ever been a part of a startup, right? And so, you know, you have to just kind of move quickly and scale and have as much impact as soon as possible. And as a small philanthropy, we had to do that. The second is in the title, Accelerating Impact for Climate and Nature. So one of the challenging things that I had to do was identify exactly what the role of AI was gonna be, not only at the Earth Fund, but also broadly speaking. We had to find our niche, if you will. And where we landed is, I'll get there. I'm not used to talking to slides. We don't normally use slides at the Earth Fund. So I'm gonna be all over the place with the slides. But let me sort of back up for a second and give you the general spiel, which is, in this decisive decade, the Earth Fund was stood up with a $10 billion fund to say we're going to grant monies at $1 billion a year over the next 10 years for this decisive decade to have a positive impact on climate and nature. So where we are now is, so far, we've granted $2.3 billion. So we're a little behind, as we started in 2020 to 2030. So 2030, I will be unemployed. We've got 7 different programs, and I'll talk to you about the programs, and we've funded up to now 270 grants, and this is the breakdown, right? Conservation and restoration is the large majority. Environmental justice, a large portion as well. The way you want to think about that is when we started in 2020, the Biden administration had put a lot of energy and focus on environmental justice. So it felt right to sort of connect those dots and really accelerate that work. Future of food, you want to think Impossible Burgers, Beyond Meat, that kind of stuff. How do we scale that? How do we expand that? How do we make that a real thing, right? Decarbonization, economics and finance, next technologies, monitoring data and accountability. The thing about the AI portfolio was when we started in 2020, right, AI was not on everyone's mind. The way that I thought about this was we needed to have AI support each one of these programs. And so the way you want to think about it is, if we put 301 million into decarbonizing energy and industry, accelerating impact for climate and nature, how do you then take AI and fund AI programs, 5 million, 10 million, just a portion of what we've funded for decarbonization? Just fund 5 million, 10 million, and actually 10x, 20x that work. That's the power of AI, right? Speed, scale, accuracy, and precision. That's what AI brings to the table. So how do we fund actual work on the ground, but then fund entities to support that work with AI? And that's the way, and so I'll give you some insight into how we're thinking about that. And the clue there is the grand challenge that we funded. So I don't even know how I want to even talk about this. Here's what I'll do. Let me go back so I don't bore you with that eye chart. Let me keep it here because the money chart is always interesting. So I'm going to walk you through sort of how we thought about this. So we had to have, I always think about things from a mental model perspective. Remember I said I wanted to support. So all of these programs have a director. So you have CEO, and then you have directors. I'm a director as well, but I don't have my own program. Originally, they thought I would just fund AI work separately. I said, no, we should be supporting, it should be AI and decarbonization, AI and future of food, right? And so really what we wanted to think about was, how do we fund problems? So what I would say I spend 30 to 40% of my time on a daily basis on the phone or on Zoom. Not on the phone, on Zoom, taking meetings. And the meetings always and consistently go like this. Hey, here's this really scary, nasty, bad problem. And I have the most interesting AI solution that can solve it. If you give me $5, $10, $15 million, I'll solve it for you. My number one question right off the bat is, how do I know that that's scary, nasty, intractable problem? I've never heard of it. You just told me that that's a problem, but I don't know that that's a problem. How do I know that that's a problem? Then how do I know that solving that problem actually will have the impact that you say it will have on climate or nature? It may have some impact. Ameliorating that problem will be positive, but will it have the impact that we're looking for, right? Removal of greenhouse gases, conserving nature, protecting habitats, growing our biodiverse ecosystem. How do I know the solution you're offering will have the type of impact that you're saying it will have? I don't. What you're asking for is for me to fund AI work in this space, and I don't know the particulars in this space. So for me, it made sense if I engaged the entities that were already solving that problem on the ground, right? So we were talking about this earlier. It's easier for me to look around and see the organizations, the nature serves of the world, the World Wildlife Foundations of the world, the WRIs, the block powers of the world, and say they've been doing strong and powerful work for years, decades, sans AI. How do I connect them with AI technology so that we can 5x, 10x their work, right? So that's the mental model that I think about, which is there are on-the-ground solutions and people who have been and who will continuously solve problems in climate and nature. And then there are companies and organizations that are experts in AI, like my former company, NVIDIA, which is well known as an AI company. Company prior to that, Esri, which is a geospatial company where I was an executive at. These companies are good at the technology and AI, not so good at the climate and nature. We have climate and nature organizations that are amazing at solving on-the-ground problems. How do we bring them together, right? So that's the mental model that I began to think through, which is how do we have the people who have solutions and how do we connect them with AI providers, right? Very simple, very simple. So the first thing we did was now I'm gonna say this out loud, so it might seem kind of a little elitist. Well, maybe not for this crowd. We reached out to Columbia University's climate school, said, look, I, as a recovering academic, I understand the value of academia, where ideas really flow and really thoughtful, innovative ideas can catch on. And I used to be the chief analytics officer for the city of New York under the de Blasio administration, his first term. And a good friend of mine who was the head of sustainability for New York is now the chief sustainability officer for Columbia University. So reached out, built a relationship. He said, look, talk to the climate school. He said, look, let's connect with the climate school. Let's have a dinner. Let's have a dinner. Again, that seems pretty elitist, but it was a good opportunity to sort of test this theory out, which is let's bring in organizations, and then we brought in people from NVIDIA, we brought in people from Google, we brought in people from all of the tech companies who were not climate and nature experts, and then we brought in climate and nature experts, right? And we said, let's just have a dinner. But it was an interactive dinner. So we had questions and at their plates, and we wanted, and we set people up because we wanted to understand if you're NVIDIA and you're a top AI scientist and you want to do work in the climate and nature space, what questions do you have? How do you think about their work? What would you like for climate and nature scientists to see and understand about AI? Vice versa, if you're an expert in climate and nature, what are some of the more intractable problems? Because what you don't want is the AI side to solve problems that really don't exist, that aren't real, at least not real to you, right? And so if you're on the climate and nature side. So we wanted to foster a conversation over dinner. And it was quite successful. It was at the president's house, and it was quite successful. But that was our opening salvo in this space, was to just have a conversation and bring these groups together. I think it was all together maybe 50 or 60 folks. But then we had a workshop. So now we moved from academia, and it was a method to the madness. Now we moved from academia, and we went to Salesforce. And at the top of the Salesforce building is this sort of convening space. Then we invited about 100 or so scientists from different universities, environmental justice leaders, folks from OpenAI, again, NVIDIA, Esri, Amazon, you name it, Microsoft, tech companies. And again, but this time it was a 2-day workshop. We have a report on our website that came out from that workshop that you can see. So that's one of the reports. So that's the AI for Climate and Nature workshop under events. Then we did spring convening. And we had a bunch of speakers. We had about 200 practitioners. It was about a 1 day with workshops and so on and so forth. And it was interesting because towards the end, this group of folks, because we were inviting some of the same groups of people, group of folks pulled me over at the spring convening. Group of people pulled me over and they said, "So you've been inviting us to all of these events, like what, why? What are you doing? What's going on? Are you just gonna keep hosting events?" Little did they know, the whole idea was to lead up to kicking off this grand challenge. The idea was we needed to understand what was most important to the community. And that's why we had all of these convenings, and we commissioned these reports. So we commissioned Columbia University to do a landscape assessment report. So we wanted to understand who was doing what in the space. We commissioned a nonprofit, Climate Change AI, to do a report for us as well. So we commissioned all of these reports, and we had all of these convenings because we wanted to understand the space and the ecosystem first before we came out with our project. The worst thing you could do, and especially if you're a philanthropy with the name Bezos, is come out and say, "We think we know better. We've got a lot of money. We're gonna just chart our own path, and we're gonna do this the way we think we should do it. No one is doing it as well as we are about to do it." Right? No, what we wanted to do was understand and move with everyone. So what we were trying to do was create a community, which we did quite successfully, such that we could have, on our first pass at the Grand Challenge, we had over 1,300 submissions for proposals. So we were able to create this community. No one cares about that. So I put these slides in here because there's a company, a nonprofit organization called Impact Observatory, which is part of this community I talked about, that does amazing stuff with satellite imagery, which you see here on your left. And then you can do AI models that help you identify and differentiate species. There's a lot of really important stuff that you can do. AI in agriculture, pest and disease detection, weather monitoring, livestock management. These are all examples of organizations that have reached out, and I've sat and talked to day after day after day. In the power space, Stanford University Deep Solar Project, Open Climate Fix is a nonprofit based out in the UK. These are all organizations that I've talked to and worked with. Treefolio in New York City is building a digital twin so that you understand the tree canopy in New York City using LiDAR and satellite technology. AI for greenhouse gas emissions, Climate Trace, another organization that we've talked to. So these are all organizations that we've engaged with and talked to. I'm gonna go to my old, like I said, I'm a recovering academic, so I'm gonna go into my old bag here. Is there anything consistent about all of these that I've shown you? I'm gonna spend 5 seconds on each slide. I'm gonna go back through. Anything that's consistent in each of these? I didn't have any images for that. Yes, so you're seeing visual, yep. So visual data elements, absolutely. The broad view of these is they're all monitoring and data, which is good, But at the Earth Fund, we don't want to do monitoring. We want to do monitoring with a focus on solving a particular problem. So, monitoring. To what end? So, it's good that you can identify and differentiate species. To what end? Bioacoustics allows you to, I call it, anybody has the app Shazam? It's like the Shazam for nature, right? You know which species are in which habitat just by listening, right? But what does that matter? The example that I always use and that our founder, Bezos Earth Fund founder, likes to use is pythons in the Everglades, invasive species, right? Have you guys seen that that documentary on pythons in the Everglades? It's absolutely amazing. So somebody brought a python over. Long story short, they're all over the place in the Everglades. They're an invasive species. There's only a small amount of people who have the know-how and the capability and the guts to try to get them out. And it's difficult because you have to go at night. You're in places where there's no cell coverage. So, if something happens to you, good luck calling the, ambulance. There's all of these things that make it so difficult to go hunt pythons. So in the documentary, they said there's a handful or so people that actually do this. So it's almost impossible to rid the Everglades of these pythons. Now imagine I'm a researcher at ASU and I come to you and I say, I've come up with this amazing AI solution that uses sensors, satellite imagery, and all of these really interesting things to tell you where the pythons are, and I can actually tell you how they've grown over the past year and where they are now and where they're likely to be in the next year. That's particularly interesting information. But what do I care about the most? Getting rid of the pythons. So you can measure and monitor, which is step one of getting the pythons out. But really what's important is removing the pythons, which is its own challenge, right? In terms of setting traps that don't hurt other species in that habitat and so on and so forth. So that's the difference. What we get is a lot of measurement and monitoring. What we want is measuring and monitoring with an eye on real tangible impact. And that's the hardest thing for us, especially on the AI side. I can't tell you how many measurement and monitoring projects I get a day. We'll use AI to integrate 475 different data sources and it'll tell us something interesting about this space. So that's good, that's actually really good. But that thing that it tells us, how do we use that? That's what I want to fund. That's what we're trying to fund. So that's the thing about this is that these are all really interesting projects and these are all real projects. But we're trying to take it a step further. So here are the barriers to progress as we see it. There's data barriers. Every time, remember I told you we convene a lot of people all the time. We got another convening on May 1st. Gaps in scarcity, multimodality, right? Otherwise known as interoperability and integration of data. Data sustainability, right? When we had that event at Salesforce Tower, the AI workshop, people would say, oh, one of the data sets that is needed is blah, 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 blah. If we had this data set, we could solve all these problems. And someone from across the room said, that's not a problem because we've had that data set, and that data set's existed for a long time. And here, well, we haven't had access to it, and it's just back and forth. And so there's this sort of lack of understanding of where data is and the quality of that data and its sustainability over time and usefulness over time. Generalizability. When researchers at ASU build models to focus on climate and nature that may not be usable in the global south, so on and so forth, right? Equity, trust, workforce, policy, and governance deployment, these are all barriers to progress for us. Anybody here familiar with Climate Change AI? We're a great nonprofit organization that focuses on climate change and AI, and they did this, they're a partner of ours. We commissioned them to do one of our reports. They did this data wish list. They actually did the work of understanding what data doesn't exist, what data should exist for really strong analysis and efforts to happen. So these are some of the opportunities that we identified. Critical data gathering and infrastructure, open source LLMs, unified data platforms, and privacy preserving data sharing, right? So these are some opportunities where advances in AI can be extremely helpful. These are other opportunities, or as we see them, underfunded areas. AI for energy management, carbon capture and storage, climate prediction analysis and modeling, and environmental justice and inclusive climate action. So these two slides are, like I said, I normally don't talk to slides, so my team put these together. But the crux of this, when we had those convenings and we brought those scientists and researchers and practitioners and policy people together, this is what we were looking for. We were looking to understand what are the opportunities where AI can be helpful and what are the opportunities where Bezos Earth Fund can be helpful. Because then we think that there is a cross-section, right? So there's places where AI can be helpful that we wouldn't exist. We wouldn't need to be in. What does that look like? That means, you know, one of the first questions I always ask is, I'll use this example. I was on the call with this group at, it was the university group. I won't tell you which university, but I was on a call with them, and they were looking to compel me to fund an initiative that was to help certain communities and neighborhoods in Puerto Rico. And they kept saying, this is such a big deal, this is needed, this is such a big deal, this is needed, this has to happen, it's important, this is key, so on and so forth. What do you think my first question to them was? Well, why? I mean, they kind of explained why. It was like, weather prediction and, and so on and so forth. The why was there. What was my first question to them? That was one of my first questions. But then we did get to a point of agreeing that it is a tough problem. No, they had a solution. My question was, it's that big of a deal, why hasn't the government invested and solved the problem? If the problem is so important to this entity, to these communities in Puerto Rico, in the global south, in the US, the problem is so important because Jeff Bezos has a lot of money, but he doesn't have more money than governments, right? I mean, some governments maybe. But we have to ask that question. We don't want to fund things that the government can and should be funding. We also shouldn't be thinking of our founder what's another question that I need to ask? If it's that serious and real of a problem, why wouldn't the market engage here? Why aren't there startups popping up? Why aren't people funding academic institutions to do this work across the board from the private sector? Right? So we have to look at, will government do this? And why wouldn't it? Will private sector take this on? Why wouldn't it? Then, yes, philanthropy. This is where risk capital comes in from philanthropy. Philanthropy shouldn't be taking on things that government and private sector can take on, right? So we needed to identify that intersection of where AI can be powerful and where untapped or underfunded ideas, where we can engage. And that's an interesting intersection. So these are some of the things that we thought about that needed to happen. Data sets and benchmarks, interdisciplinary collaboration, so on and so forth. Now, in order to do those, we decided to come up with this concept of an AI Grand Challenge. And the Grand Challenge goes like this, and it's pretty simple. How am I on time? Another 20 minutes? Okay. So the Grand Challenge goes like this. We opened up an opportunity for climate and nature organizations, not AI organizations. It's called an AI Grand Challenge, but we wanted climate and nature organizations to apply. We wanted you to just offer an idea. We had the hardest time with academic institutions for a couple of reasons. I'm gonna pick on you guys. Again, I'm a recovering academic at Johns Hopkins, so I get it. A couple of things. One is, we weren't looking to be a bridge funding for a project that you already had. We were looking for a really crazy, grand idea. We wanted you to think of something incredibly interesting. Two is, we didn't want any details. We just wanted an idea. So we actually limited the proposal to 2 pages. You know how difficult it was for academic institutions to give us a 2-page idea? And it wasn't even 2 pages. It actually was less, it was actually like come down to 1 page. The rest stuff was just like name and, you know, collaborators and stuff like that, which was 2 pages. We wanted just 1 page, 3 paragraphs worth of just an idea. No details, no specifics. Don't talk about the tech, don't talk about anything. Just, what's your idea, all right? That's what we wanted. What we wanted was people to share ideas. And then what we would do is fund those ideas in phase 1 with seed grants, $50,000 a piece. So those seed grants would then give you the opportunity to expand on that idea, bring in collaborators. You can charge to that 50 grand, bring in collaborators, and then ultimately submit a full budgeted proposal for $2 million. So the idea was, the reason why we did that was because, one, we wanted to ensure that anyone at any institution anywhere in the world could submit an idea. And so we didn't want to say, and this is coming from someone who was a researcher at Johns Hopkins, and it was so easy to get grants from NIH. I mean, it was just like hand over fist at Hopkins. Like that was so easy because you had the processes in place. You already, as soon as you started working at Hopkins, you were a part of research projects that were already getting funding in, so all you had to do was just keep applying for funding. But in this case, you didn't need to have shown prior data, prior work. You just needed to have a good idea. So quite frankly, it could be ASU or it could be an HBCU. As long as it was a good idea, we were excited to see funded. And so that was the whole idea, is to really get people thinking, but not AI companies. We disallowed AI companies from submitting proposals. We wanted just climate and nature companies. So if you were an academic institution, your computer science team couldn't submit the proposal. The climate school submitted the proposal, right? And we were very serious about that part. And so once you were funded for the seed grant, we have partners, NVIDIA, Amazon, Microsoft, OpenAI, a few other partners, AI2, Paul Allen's Institute for AI, that would come in and partner with the climate and nature organizations to help them work on their larger proposal for the $2 million. So again, for us, it was about having people who were on the ground already solving problems come to the understanding that I think I can 5x, 10x my work, 100x maybe, using AI. And that's the idea that we wanted from them, right? Best case scenario for us was a proposal that said, we have been on the ground trying to stop poachers from killing snow leopards. We have been doing this, and we have been marginally successful at X percentage of mitigation per year. With AI, we believe that we can 5 times, 10 times that percentage this year, right? Again, on-the-ground organizations that are seeing marginal success, seeing success in some way, but that believe that AI can actually expand and scale that success for them, right? And that's how we believe we get through this decisive. AI can be helpful in helping us get through this decisive decade. So what we did was we focused on 4 focus areas: sustainable protein, biodiversity conservation, power grid. Say it's 4 focus areas. The 4th one is a wild card, right? So what that was we got a lot of interesting ideas. I had folks from medical schools sort of saying, well, we think, solving environmental issues is like health, it's the health of the earth. And, we think we have some ideas that sort of a cross-section of health and environment and so on and so forth. And so it didn't fit here, but we wanted to create space for just big ideas. So we had this wild card category. So remember I talked about the different phases. So phase 1 was we had a bunch of virtual sessions. We had the launch, and then phase 2 is going to happen shortly. Once we're going to announce the winners of phase 1, and then phase 2 are going to happen. Now, it's a $100 million grant challenge. The first round is $30 million. We'll have 2 more rounds of $30 million. So once this first round is done, we'll have a second round and we'll have a third round. And the idea is, at the end of spending $100 million, so let's go all the way back. Oh, this is slow. I'm gonna go all the way back because I don't really. All right. I believe that if I spend 30 million just on this first round for 3 focus areas plus a wild card, sustainable proteins, which is future of food. We have power grid, which is decarbonizing energy and industry. Then we have biodiversity conservation, which is conserving and restoring nature. How much? That's about 6, 8, that's $1.1 billion we've spent on those 3 alone. My theory of change is that with just 30 million and 20 winners, we can actually scale that $1.1 billion to have more impact than was expected to have with that $1.1 billion investment. Because now we're using AI in those spaces. So we funded $1.1 billion, sans AI, no AI. Maybe some data work and so on and so forth, data collection, but no AI. $30 million to support those should scale that work. And another 30 million and another 30 million. It's this concept of sort of asymmetric engagement, right? It's small, but it has a very big impact. Small investment, large impact. I don't have to invest $590 million in AI. That's the power of AI. I should be able to give someone $2 million and scale that work up to have a grand impact. That's the AI team. That's what we're expecting to do at the Earth Fund, is support these large programs and fund small amounts of money in a targeted way to grow the impact in each of those portfolios, only within those portfolios. I think that's my deck. Thank you.
I have so many questions. First of all, that was fantastic, just to get the overview. So going back to your snow leopards and poaching example, right? And so you were talking about that AI is doing pretty good at monitoring. So, but the challenges that you're describing are social. Like the answer to snow leopards and poaching may not be more monitoring. What solutions are you seeing that AI can solve the real sustainability people problems that are causing the snow leopard and poaching problem? Are you seeing solutions that AI can solve?
Let me back away from the snow leopard one, because I have zero understanding in that space. I was using it as sort of a drive-by example. Let me use a better example. So I live in Baltimore, Maryland, which is right outside of Washington, D.C. Anybody familiar with Baltimore, Maryland? You're familiar with The Wire? So where my son and his mom live is in West Baltimore. So the short version of Baltimore is, if you've ever watched The Wire, they call it the kidneys. Some people call it the butterfly. So you have West Baltimore and East Baltimore. And those are just like, a lot of bad stuff happens here. A lot of the Black community lives here. Here, that's downtown Baltimore. This is Charles Street, and then here's Johns Hopkins, right? So it's like, you got this corridor, which is all good, and then you have these 2 kidneys, right? So they live in the West kidney. And illegal dumping happens and it happens in a lot of urban cities. It's terrible. Happens in New York, but in Baltimore it happens, and it has an environmental impact. And so his mom called me and said, legal dumping in our neighborhood is just terrible. Is there something that you can do, that AI can do? 'Cause most people call me and ask me, can AI solve any number of problems? The answer was yes. right? So to your point, the social, emotional, health issues that come around illegal dumping. One, people have to have a certain respect for their community. People have to have a certain understanding that when you're dumping stuff illegally, it's not harmless. It's actually having a negative impact. They did studies and it showed that when kids wake up and they get in Baltimore, get dressed and go to school, and there's just all sorts of illegal dumping in their neighborhood, that it actually brings their sort of sense of self and sense of ability to raise out of their environment down, right? And so these things are real. But how does AI solve that, right? One of the things we talked about was using LiDAR from drones to actually detect when, because where mostly illegal dumping is happening, there are a lot of vacant buildings. And so when companies buy the vacant buildings, in Baltimore, you don't buy one vacant building, you buy a whole block of vacant buildings, for like $1 each building, but you buy them all, and then you clear them out. And so instead of paying this company, and it may not even be a company, it could be a group of 2 or 3 people who decide to buy these up. Instead of paying, you actually dump it, right? And you find some area that no one seems to be, and you just dump it. And it's refrigerators and mattresses and tires and garbage bags of stuff from these. And so again, there is a question mark with regards to the sociological and the impact and should the community react to it. But I think what's key here is we have to use AI to empower not only the government, but also the local community members to know what's going on in their neighborhood, to understand where it's happening, but then also to hold the perpetrators responsible and let them know that something is protecting this neighborhood, right? And so I do think that in certain instances, I can't speak to the snow leopard, but I can, in this instance, for sure, AI plays a bigger role than just the technology. It is a mechanism that empowers that community to be more self-sufficient. Sure.
Okay, so my question is about that university in Puerto Rico and this bystander effect of if it was important enough, someone would do it. What would you have said to them if they said, I need to take big risks here and I need audacious philanthropy to support me so that I can fail? I need you to invest in this to de-risk my project so that they will take it seriously and fund it.
Yeah, I think that's, so that statement, so we are meant to be risk capital, right? And that's exactly right. The question is, why am I talking to University of Albany? Why am I talking to University of Albany and not University of Albany with the government and a whole bunch of other people at the table, right? So that's what it would take. So that statement that you just made in terms of, hey, look, we're making a we've got a big idea and we need to test this idea out and we want to see this idea through to fruition. We think philanthropy is the best way to fund this. That's exactly right. But the question I had, it wasn't just why isn't government funding it, it's why isn't government even at the table, right? So, but yes, I think that's a good way to think about it.
Thank you for the fascinating presentation. I'm curious a little about the process. And when you're looking at these potential projects and you're assessing them, do you make an effort to distinguish between sort of scale up and scope up? Because it seems like scale up would imply kind of a linear pathway in which their insights about growth are derived from what they've already been doing from history. Whereas a lot of these kinds of problems need sort of more transformational solutions and sort of that scope side. Is the scope within the ambit maybe of a startup to be able to even look at, or is that something on a much larger level and something a little bit outside of what you're doing?
Great question, and let me see if I can take a stab at answering that. So we have an entity that we've partnered with, WRI, World Resources Institute, to stand up called the Systems Change Lab. Systems Change Lab is a website you guys can Google and go to. They have a list of what they refer to as shifts. And so where we see us having the most impact is in those areas and domains, some of them you're looking at, in those areas and domains that are ripe for shift, right? They refer to them in the climate and nature space as tipping points, right? So these things are at tipping points. They can either go one way or the other way. We're trying to tip them in the positive way in this decisive decade. So we really look at two things. One is there are shifts that just haven't gotten out of the mud, right? So that's the scope up, right? Like that's the idea that investments, funding hasn't happened here because there is a lot of risk, right? And we want to de-risk that. And so let's get behind that, because we do think if we can figure this thing out, the market, governments, everyone will jump in, and then it'll be off. So that's where we're willing to go outside of a scope. Scale up is where we say, look, people have been in here, and they've been hitting it hard for a while. And I mean, it can go one or the other way. But if we put 400 million and we bring in these resources and so on and so forth, we can tip it in the right direction. So we spend a lot of time before we commit a single dollar to anything. We spend a lot of time thinking about, is this a new space that we should get in and unstick it with the hopes that the market and others would take it and run with it? Because that's what we want to see. We want to see companies be started and whole industries created around a small investment that we've made, or efforts where people have been moving in a right direction, but it just needs skates. Just needs skates that we can push it. So we think about that all the time, and it just depends on where we land on those questions. Well, yeah, we can keep it in one section and then move it to another section.
Okay, well, I'll keep it rolling here. So as I was thinking particularly about this Puerto Rico example and sort of why isn't the government in the room, so many of the pressing sort of climate and other sustainability challenges we have, like some of those are arguably going to be very difficult for the private sector. Like they don't all monetize. Like some of them really are fundamentally governance and policy issues. They're public goods problems that we need to sort of solve in a collective action kind of way. So I'm kind of curious from your experience of, this is still new, but like, what are some lessons that are maybe being learned about how to better bring public sector and other sorts of dimensions of governance in? Because in many ways, AI is providing decision support, it's providing data streams that we've never had before and lowering, the cost of knowing things and making decisions, but that doesn't necessarily make governance easier in and of itself. And so I'm curious sort of how you think about how can we get the government in the room, maybe.
Yeah. Oof, okay, all right. So I'm gonna preface that answer with, so I always give the short version of my background because I'm getting older and I don't like the longer version. But so I spent a couple of years in the Obama administration. I was a CTO at a federal agency, and then I spent 4 years as a chief analytics officer for New York City. So I have government experience at the highest levels. And so I just want to preface my response by saying that I don't not like the government. I have had opportunities to understand the value and what the government brings to the table. Where I tend to stand on this. So we funded, as part of the environmental justice effort, which was the larger part of our funding, we funded an effort called Greening America's Cities. And so we picked 10 cities, 5 cities, New Mexico, Atlanta, I don't remember the 5 cities. It wasn't my program, but Greening America's Cities, we picked 5 cities, funded each city $10 million. Not the government, city. So we funded grassroots organizations that are in these cities in partnership with the government to work on building green space, green infrastructure within each city. So parks, green roofs, and so on and so forth. So the way we think about government is that government is a piece of the solution, right? So we think about bottom-up implementation. So when we go to a city and we gave them $10 million, we said, we want to understand who are the nonprofits and the civic organizations and environmental justice organizations in this city who have been busting their ass for decades. Let's fund them. We had conversations with the mayors, the congresspeople, the senators, the governors of those states, of those cities, literally, because obviously, like, we can, because Jeff Bezos says, hey, I want to have a conversation. We have a conversation with them. So we had a conversation with all of the government leaders. Said, this is what we're doing. We want to make sure that you can get behind this and partner and collaborate with these entities that we're funding. Maybe you can bring your own funding, maybe not. We can give you funding. But it wasn't about funding the government and then hoping that it sort of trickles down from top down. It was bottom up, or a coalition building in partnership with the government, because you can't get certain things done without the government. So I think that's the best example I can give you of how we think about the role of government. They should be a part of, but not be the part.
We're still over here. I stole the microphone now. That was really clear, and it sounds to me like your founder, Bezos, has had a big impact where what you guys are really working on, like, you look at Amazon, right? Transformed, right, the market consumption sector, but it also didn't. I mean, it's just the market on new technology steroids, right? But it's still a market. You buy your stuff, it's what we still got. It sounds, and so I'm struggling a little bit with the grand challenge that it sounds like you guys are looking for, in general, you guys are looking for opportunities where you can kind of do that. In this case, like AI could help these people, like the Python example. We could help get rid of all the Pythons like 1 billion times better. Okay, well, I would also argue that there's, like, just getting rid of the Pythons is yesterday's news to some extent. Like, we have a new ecosystem that involves Pythons and whatnot. So one question is, and I don't mean that, I don't want to dismiss, like, there's maybe the majority of places we're just doing it is like, oh, do it, right? Get rid of the carbon. Like, do you look to the folks on the ground to bring that a third rail? Is that where the new ideas, that is also entertained? Like, if somebody comes in and says, well, maybe it's not getting rid of the Pythons. We've been trying to figure, right? Is that available? And it's kind of interesting. I do a lot of work in circular economy now, and we work with these business guys, and they're all excited about it. They won't do it, and the market wants it and all. But then they look at how hard it is to do it compared to what they know.
Right.
And the conversation just dies, right? So there's those two things where there's like a new idea, like, what about not getting rid of the Pythons, or where there is this giant barrier against the excitement, but the new ideas aren't actually going to come out of that community. They're going to come out of somebody else. So is it that? So how do you guys deal with that?
Yeah. Thank you for that question. So essentially the question is around, you're asking me, how do we ultimately get to the point of funding something? What's this process, right? And so it's a long slog that includes doing a lot of what you talked about. So the first thing is, we don't take incoming ideas. The Grand Challenge was the first time at the Bezos Earth Fund that we sort of open sourced ideas. Prior to that, what we did was, if you look at our website, we have a bunch of directors who are sort of, considered leaders in their industry, and we have a bunch of fellows. And then, remember I mentioned the Systems Change Lab, and we have these shifts that we talk about. Then you had our former CEO, he just stepped down recently, Andrew Steer, who is well-known, well-regarded in this space. And so we had internally a sense of the things that we wanted to do, right? So with all of these leaders and these big brains and directors and so on and so forth, we kind of knew what we wanted to do. So then we would get a sense of who's out there doing it. Then we reach in, we host events, we go and sit and talk and so on and so forth. And then we begin to see what sort of ideas, what sort of challenges have, kept these things from happening at scale and so on and so forth. Then all of a sudden, there's an idea that's worth funding that pops up. And we take that, and then we walk through this process of saying, if we fund it, what does it look like? What's the impact? What's the game-changing end result here? How much would it cost? And then we do a due diligence on the vehicle to get this thing done. And what I mean by that is, do we fund organizations and step back and say, you do it? Do we create entities and fund those entities to get this work done? We also do due diligence on the organizations themselves to see what have they accomplished over time, what can they accomplish within that time. To your point around, there is this big gap between grand idea and actually getting the thing done. So we do a lot of diligence before funding, like a lot. I'm going to the board on Monday for a funding package. And I was just mentioning, people was asking me, how was my flight over? It's like, I'm literally, because pens down on any document that goes to the board today. So I'm literally furiously texting, because I don't have internet on the plane, but I can text to get the document right? Like this has been a long slog since like January. Just the document itself, much less the work that we did. There's a lot of work that goes into it and a lot of thought. And we rely on sort of the experts at the Earth Fund, which is a good time for me to say this, that the Earth Fund as a philanthropic entity, we are a lot different than some of the ones that you may be familiar with, like Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, where we're capping out at 60, 70 employees. We're meant to just be sort of thinkers. We want to get money out, whereas the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation really has like this overarching governance mechanism where it's reporting and all this other stuff. Like we're more so focused on that, which is, this has to be a problem that is a real problem, that if we tackle it the right way and we build the right mechanisms to execute it, that we can have the impact that we want. We're not just interested in getting money out, just to get money out. It's not like Brewster's Millions.
First off, thank you for coming in, talking today.
I feel like I can't hear unless I'm like,
Can you hear me now?
okay.
Okay, sorry, I think I was too far away. Thank you for coming and talking today. And my question is, there's a lot of practical applications to use AI for sustainability. But I'm curious, is there like a desire within the Bezos Earth Fund or any of the partners to look at like sustainable AI? I mean, by like land use, water use, energy use, things like that. Obviously, we're using it for, you know, other things. I'm curious, like to flip the script, what's the desire for that, especially as AI is implemented into more industries and continues to expand?
Yeah, so that's such an interesting question because, so one, we think about it all the time, right? Because we sort of have to have a thought about this, which is if it almost, causes whatever city, what is it, Idaho, almost cause Idaho to have a drought every time OpenAI creates a new model or something. Like that's how much water they use to cool the servers. That's something that we need to understand and understand the impact that AI is having. And so we try to be very thoughtful around, and especially someone such as myself who came from NVIDIA, who was at NVIDIA for years before coming over, I understand all of those conversations and all of the impact on the earth that we're having in standing up these data centers and so on and so forth. So we do think about that and we do track that and we try to understand where companies are with that. Couple of things. One is we believe that, all right, let me not do the we believe thing. Let me backtrack here. I get a lot of conversations from organizations sort of saying, we know how, give us X amount of dollars, we know how to scale down the use of AI and its footprint and so on and so forth, right? My sense is, and especially my experience at NVIDIA, is that those companies have a far better chance of thinking about and building those solutions. Don't know that a nonprofit that doesn't own a multi-billion-dollar data center will have, or academic institution will have the leg up on figuring that stuff out. And again, if we were into funding white papers and research, that's a different story. We can fund that all over the place for every academic institution that's thinking about that. But that's not what we fund. Like I said, we fund impact. So if we fund an entity, we're funding them not to research and write about the possibility of doing this. We're funding them to actually deploy lower footprint data centers. And we just don't know that anybody other than these organizations that are actually owning and building these data centers are thinking about that, are able to do that in a real way.
The small organizations at the table, just like my question.
At whose table?
At that table, the NVIDIA table. Is there a university there?
Oh yeah, for sure. That I remember when I was there, yeah, which was like 3 years ago, but yeah.
Thanks for a really great talk. It's really cool to sort of see the landscape of what's going on in this space. And I haven't known much about all of this that's going on, so it's really great to get that overview. I think a lot about how we sort of process information and cooperate and coordinate. That's kind of my area. And so hearing you talk about what can be done with these systems makes me wonder, like, in your mind, like, what's your sort of vision for where we could go with this? And I'll be a little bit more specific, right? So you could think of some of these things that are going on with AI as we're almost like creating these collective information processing systems that are almost like nervous systems, right? You have all of these sensors, you have these processes that are going on, and then you have some sort of output, right? That's the impact that you're talking about. And you could think of those as sort of individual entities that are each sort of specialized for particular domains, or you could think of them as potentially being more integrated into like a Earth nervous system. When you are looking at this sort of very big picture, are you imagining this as like sort of these individual streams that are sort of these collective processors, but they're not necessarily all integrated? Or are you looking at building something that would be more integrated and that might kind of fit a little bit more with this idea of like, you know, creating a nervous system that allows actual, you know, in real time response that is integrating information from many different domains in order to figure out what the appropriate responses are?
Yeah, I think there's a lot to that question. Yeah, yeah. So when I first started at the Earth Fund, I don't know how familiar you guys are with. So when I left NVIDIA, Jensen Huang, who's the CEO of NVIDIA, had a pet project that I was a part of called Earth 2. And Earth 2 was meant to be, it is this 3D digital twin of the Earth that literally simulates everything we know about the Earth at a grand scale, but then also at a micro scale. And it's run by algorithms. It was a $500 million project. But then you have a similar Earth digital twin project being run by the UK called Destination Earth. Again, it's a digital twin of the Earth. Then you have AI2, you obviously have Google Earth. So you have all of these efforts that are basically saying, look, if we take one snapshot of what's going on in the Earth at a micro scale, we just kind of can solve that problem. But if you pull out at a macro scale, but then can actually simulate Earth in terms of weather, in terms of climate, in terms of deforestation, in terms of methane gas, all of these things that are happening in a connected way, you can understand better the places in which you can have the most impact. So I think to have a certain level of connectedness, I want to answer your question by project. So I just mentioned a bunch of projects where they think in a connected way. So by project, yes, but also thinking connected by across domains, right? So let's just take the domains we have here. How you know, your question can really be saying, how are we thinking about conservation and restoration, and what's its connection to solving problems in energy and industry, and that connection to future of food and so on and so forth, right? What I will say is, in that respects, so by project, we do try to think about this integration that you're talking about. Across these domains, what I will say is, just like a startup sort of has this concept called product market fit, right? And so startups, their only path to success is finding that product market fit and then hitting that and running. They can call it land, and sometimes they call it land and expand, which is when you're good at this thing, then you can expand, right? I think that's our pathway. So we've been extremely good at nature and conservation and biodiversity, extremely good. So we want to continue to be successful there and then begin to find connections. But if you're asking me if all of those directors across all of these domains are constantly talking to each other and funding things that are connected, I'm gonna plead the fifth on that one.
All right, but one more question here. Okay.
amazing discussion. I'm glad that segue happened with startups, as probably one of the few startup founders in the room. One of my many interests is wildfires, not starting them, but ending them. And so the slide with all the drones and the sensors are all things that I've looked at. They're off-the-shelf technologies. I've developed a team, a CRM of different people that I could tap into. How do I give myself the best shot at landing some sort of funding with Bezos Foundation, knowing that I've talked to BLM, Forest Service, individuals that have been smoke jumpers, you name it, but maybe I haven't worked directly with one of the organizations. Does that still give me a shot, or is there a way that I should go about continuing those relationships to get more support?
Yeah, well, why don't I just take your information? I think that in terms of like scope, wildfires is something that has caught the attention of our leadership for obvious reasons. And again, we try to be careful into lanes that we move into, because if, again, you got to think about market, government, and then, but there may be places where philanthropy can kind of de-risk some things. So I think the short answer is, let me take your information, but that we have had conversations about, like, we didn't follow one path because we liked the idea. We just didn't know if the organization was the organization that could execute on it. And so that's a space that I think we're very interested in.
Okay, join me in thanking our guests.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, good. That was really fun. Yeah, I think we had a lot more people online.